I will take you up on your last point. Not many Italian speakers in the panel, so is there somebody in the room that wants to speak? Any questions? Nobody yet ready. I'd like to sorry. Excuse me, I didn't see you.
That's okay.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Jim Thompson. I'm from England. I have a question for the panel, which hasn't quite been, in all of the numerous and encouraging expressions of optimism, hasn't quite been addressed in the discussions so far. And what concerns me, I think, is this concurrence of three factors: global warming, increase in world population, and biodiversity. And for example, we saw this year the fires in Russia, that they are no longer exporting grain. This has led to a considerable increase in the price of grain and wheat worldwide, which obviously puts a lot of economic pressure onto the farming community to increase their production. And you see this sort of kind of conflict developing between agricultural production, which may well become more profitable as certain areas go out of production due to climate change, world population, and the squeeze on biodiversity. And I wonder if the panel have any observations on that.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who'd like to? In that case, can I ask some of the panelists to respond to this?
You've talked about the integration of three colossally big problems and a new manifestation of it as a food shortage. Okay. The gentleman at the end from the slow food movement talked about a new vision for how we think about food. If we thought about food differently, that problem wouldn't exist. If we thought that these things are problems, like we want to solve them, they would go away. That's the reason I'm optimistic, is at the end of the day, how we see the world determines what the world is. And I think there would be nobody in this room, and certainly we had an interesting experience at the World Wilderness Congress in Merida in Mexico in November 2009. We had some children there, all 12 years old, 10 years old. And one of the boys spoke at the final afternoon, and he said, would every adult in this room who believes that we're managing the world sustainably please stand up? Not one person stood up. And there were people from over 50 countries there, 2,000 delegates. I would bet if I asked the same question in this room, would somebody please stand up if you think we're doing a good job of managing the world sustainably? Not very many of you would stand up. So everybody knows there's a problem. And the question is, what are we doing about it? What solutions are we proposing? What are the dreams that we want to advance? Instead of there's just another train wreck coming. There's absolutely no reason for optimism on the current model. Everything's going to hell in a handbasket. Those are the facts. Everybody in this room knows that. So what are we going to do about it? That's where the optimism is.
If I could add to Harvey's rather depressing comment there, that I think one of the keys is protected areas. And in spite of never really looking at ourselves in that role, I think since our origins, we created these little places and we've sort of protected them and never thought about them in aggregate in their importance in terms of providing long-term ecosystem resilience and restoration and inspiration. So as we face this ecological and population bottleneck at the world scale, compounded by climate change, the places that we manage are literally the key to this. And we just need to recognize that we as a community have this responsibility to step up on the world stage and assist the rest of the world to understand how important long-term sustainability of the ecosystem really is. And we have examples right there in our hands to use.
Well, I strongly believe what I said last night about rediscovering the values and these values are all linked to nature, and strongly believe that us as conservationists and protected area people have to lead the way. And just wanted to add that the same Dalai Lama I was referring to last night was saying when he had a similar question that one solution might be for the overpopulation, just ask spiritual movements to encourage people to become monks and nuns.
Stefan, you didn't talk earlier.
Yes, I think the question is very topical, of course, also in Brussels when we discuss at the moment the reform of the Common Agricultural Policy. Some people say we don't need, actually, in a few years' time, we won't need any public support to farmers anymore because food will be so expensive that they will earn so much money from what they produce that they won't need our support anymore. Well, this will probably be only a few farmers, much fewer than now, and they will not necessarily produce what we think they should and where we think they should. And on top of that, you have biofuels and others. So it is a major problem. And that's why I think that the consequent reforms that have been done so far have been going in the right direction, meaning from going away from supporting production to supporting income in connection with the delivery of public goods. And we have to now take this next step much stronger. That means that those public goods also being ecosystem services, nature protection and biodiversity, to make sure that those farmers that are doing a good job by producing high quality food, but without degrading the nature that is around them, that they actually get more support than those that don't need this support so much. And we are, this is the key challenge. The problem is that when you look at what the member states, at least some of them, of the big ones that are very influential, their official position on how the CAP should change is not at all going in that direction. It's please keep as it is. And I think there is a real lack of public discussion about these things because the position they have is because there are farmers' associations and others that are determining very much what should be the agricultural policy, that this is their position. But if you would ask the wider public, the whole population in a country, what do you want us to pay our farmers to do for? It's true that a lot of will say we want to have cheap food. That is a fact, and we have to deal with that. But also, if you tell them, you think it's good to pay this farmer to do this job he's doing here in the Abruzzo, in preserve, I'm sure a lot of that would then there would be a much higher acceptance for that. So that's what we have to work on. And for example, in the first pillar, which is this income support to the farmer, getting in there some recognition for those that are in a Natura 2000 site or in a protected area and do the right thing as far as we are concerned, that will be the key challenge for the reform of the CAP. I'm not sure we'll succeed, but this is what we are trying to go to.
The present economic crisis is really a kind of a wake-up call for all of us that the market-based economy and capitalism will not survive. Those markets which devour the natural resources and deplete the ecosystem services will not last. Instead of trying to rectify it using developing the credit, but investing in the infrastructure, the natural investment, which can increase the resilience of the system so that the services will be unhindered, that is more important. This is the message what the real, the depression or the economic crisis is really going to give us. This is this clear message what we have given in TEEB D1, that is the policy makers, that instead of investing in the infrastructure development in US, for the job employment generation, etc., if we can really invest in the nature, that will last for more time.
Ma mi pare che si stia tornando alla questione della centralità del cibo. C'è una situazione un po' paradossale nel mondo. Ci sono agricoltori ricchi che producono cibi di bassa qualità per consumatori poveri e agricoltori poveri nelle zone marginali, pastori, piccoli casari che producono prodotti di alta qualità per persone ricche. Questo modello è un modello che non funziona più, che deve essere cambiato. Cambiare questo modello vuol dire intervenire direttamente sui processi economici che sono alla base della produzione del cibo. Allora, dato che è molto difficile, perché da questo punto di vista i governi non ci sentono, perché i governi su questo tema, rapporto produzione del cibo e ambiente, non ci sentono, prova ne è che la Commissione europea, la politica agricola europea è una politica agricola che, anche se sta migliorando, è ancora fortemente condizionata dalle grandi concentrazioni industriali. Tutti sugli OGM è chiarissimo come stiamo andando verso un meccanismo che porta avanti questo tipo di politica. Allora, io credo che la soluzione possa essere in questo caso solo una, quella, e l'ho detta prima, dobbiamo tornare a ripensare modelli di vita e di produzione locale, ricostruire meccanismi economici, sociali, locali, ricostruire le comunità locali. Attraverso questa strada si può recuperare anche le cose che si dicevano prima. Noi non possiamo far produrre nel sud del mondo prodotti di bassa qualità per dare i prodotti a basso prezzo ai cittadini del nord del mondo. Questa cosa non funziona più, questa cosa è distruttiva per l'ambiente. Quindi dobbiamo lavorare su queste tematiche e comunicare fortemente queste tematiche. L'educazione ambientale è anche educazione alimentare.
I'd just like to go back to the original question in a sense and think about those elements in concert together, which is climate change, population, and indeed productivity more broadly. Thinking about, for my country, Australia, we're a very large continent, a small population. I think in a general sense we're experiencing significant water shortage. We're very much seeing the early onset of climate change in our production in food bowl areas. We're also seeing the most dramatic lift in fire and fire frequency and scale than we've experienced before, and many of you will know that many Australians were killed in some terrible fires last year, which were proof and evidence of that dramatic impact. I think the most important thing, though, is to give your population, whether it's at the EU level or the continental scale, the permission to have a debate about these issues. So that requires leadership at a national level to have a debate about population, to have a debate about climate change in a sense, and then look to pragmatic, practical things that people can begin to act on. Without that local action, without people's local attention to those big issues, they will feel disconnected and things will go as they usually do. The question of food production for us is also vitally important. We are no less subject to the issues of food production than anyone else in our continent. Getting food production at the right scale is also part of that debate that I think needs to be given airtime, given permission at an EU scale, at an America scale, whatever scale you choose to do. But most of that will require diverse leadership. And I remark that it will be women and men of courage who will lead those debates, because it's a torrid and difficult area when we're asking people to think and change at a continental scale. I think those people are probably largely in the room. Good luck.